The U.S. government's plan to negotiate Medicare drug prices with Big Pharma may actually result in higher costs and fewer new drugs available to senior citizens in the long run. Phil Kerpen, president of American Commitment, describes the new law as a classic mob-style, quote, offer you can't refuse, a plan that is presented in a way to win the votes of seniors. He's here to explain. Phil, it's good to talk with you again. So members of Congress and the president are calling this drug pricing reform, but you contend it will make matters worse. Explain.
Well, it's important to understand, Gary, that when they say negotiation, they're really only using that word because it polls well, because it's popular, because people like the idea of it. But the centerpiece of this bill is actually giving the Secretary of Health and Human Services the power to set prices for the most popular, most widely used drugs in Medicare. It's not a direct price control because they have sort of this pretend negotiation where the secretary sets a price, and if the company disagrees with it, they don't have to go along with it, but they get taxed 95% of their total sales of that product, which of course no company can ever possibly sustain. So in practice, it's government price setting. Now, when the government sets the price for something, that always results in one of three things or some combination of the three. It either results in shortages, it results in a decline in quality, or it results in black market activity. You see that every time you have government price setting. And in the context of prescription drugs in particular, the kind of shortages that you get are not shortages of the drugs that already exist, because those are typically very inexpensive to create one more dose of. They're shortages of drugs that don't yet exist, because those cost billions of dollars to develop. And so I think we're going to see a significant decline in research and development in the pharmaceutical sector, and therefore a lot fewer new drugs and treatments developed if this is allowed to take effect. It doesn't take effect until 2026. And so there's going to be a fight over the next several years to see if it actually takes effect. But that's kind of the central provision, Gary. And I think certainly in the near term, we're more likely to see higher prices than lower prices.
Phil, everyone favors lower prescription drug prices. I know low-income seniors who are forced to choose between buying their medicine or food each month. So price controls may help insurance companies, but why won't they also help cut the cost for seniors who often find drug prices excessive? Won't it help at all?
Well, I think that, as I mentioned, I think that there are going to be some cross currents, some perverse incentives to raise prices rather than lower them in the near term, which certainly won't help those people. I think that to answer your question, though, let's say a price control were perfectly effective. It did exactly what it's supposed to do, and it forced down prices. Well, that's still going to cause shortages. It's going to mean that new breakthrough drugs may not be covered by Medicare at all if companies decide not to participate. And that could actually force seniors to pay out of pocket instead of getting coverage from their existing drug plans. And so there are a lot of ways that this could go awry. But what I would say in particular for those seniors that are hit the hardest by drug prices is we've got to lower drug prices in a way that fixes the drivers of costs that are making them so high now. It doesn't just layer more government regulation and bureaucracy on top of that. And what I mean by that is, as long as it costs over $1 billion to develop a new drug and bring it to market, drugs are going to be expensive, even if you somehow shift those costs to taxpayers or you try to suppress them with price controls. So what I would say is we really need to focus on making the development and the regulatory approval process much less burdensome, much less costly. You know, one of the things we've seen over the last couple of years during COVID is there really only seem to be a handful of companies that actually know how to get products through the FDA approval process. And smaller drug companies either partner with one of them or they get stymied, and it takes years to get an approval. You look at the difference between BioNTech that partnered with Pfizer, got theirs through right away, and Novavax that said, we're going to go on our own. It took them years to get an approval. I think we've got to have a process that is much less partial to a small number of companies and is much less burdensome and bureaucratic. And maybe we could get the cost of developing a new drug and bring it to market down significantly and lower prices that way. But I would tell seniors that are concerned about how high costs are now, first of all, that drug prices have risen much less than almost everything else in the economy. So we're doing something right rather than wrong in that regard. And going forward, the most important thing is that we keep developing new drugs, that we have cancer treatments, that we have cures for Alzheimer's, and disrupting that incentive, which I think this Democrat bill is going to do, is really going to harm people's lives. And we need to find ways to lower costs that don't do that.
Maybe incentives. Okay, Phil Kerpen, president of American Commitment. Thank you, Phil, for setting us straight today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.